Today, the Louisiana Legislature convened for day 5 of the special session on crime. KALB is in the studio now with a breakdown of some of the measures that were written by members of the Central Louisiana Delegation Caucus. Colin?
Yeah, that's right, Johnny. 3 bills written by Central Louisiana lawmakers have either already been discussed or are set to be discussed by the state legislature. Here's what those measures are and what this means for Cenla and the state if passed. In the State House of Representatives, House Bill 3, authored by State Rep. Rhonda Butler of Ville Platte, would require drug testing for controlled dangerous substances within 24 hours of booking a person, followed by random testing to verify drug-free status. HB 3 went through 2 amendments before a unanimous 105-0 House vote that sent the measure to the state Senate floor. The proposed bill will head to one more committee before coming back to the Senate floor for a final debate. House Bill 5 was written by Speaker Pro Temp and State Rep. Mike Johnson of Pineville. This measure would designate the crime of illegal use of weapons or dangerous instrumentalities as a crime of violence. After one amendment was made to HB 5, the bill will now go through committee before a final passage. And finally, over at the state Senate, Senate Bill 8 would create the Office of State Public Defender and transfer authority, from the Louisiana Public Defender Board. State Senator Mike Reese of Leesville's bill is on the House floor and is scheduled to be read this Sunday. The special session needs to wrap up by March 6th. The regular legislative session is scheduled to begin on March 11th, and we'll have more information on those Cenla bills over on our website. Johnny, back to you.
Thank you, Colin.